let's dive into Material World because it's a great read. And maybe we can start with what sparked the idea and when you started executing on it, because there are, of
Mm.
course, authors who are well known for writing about materials and energy transition. Maybe some professors are most noticeable. So I think you kind of find a unique angle. And I think that's also necessary in order to embark on writing a book, because it's a long journey, as you said, right? So
So where this started, and yeah, we can talk about there are some fantastic, amazing minds in the worlds of material science, but also kind of looking at energy, who I cite a lot of in the book. But for me, as a kind of normal person, I was struck when I went to a mine. It was a gold mine a few years ago in Nevada, and I actually was going for a totally different reason. I was going to cover some story about statistics. So I was looking for something to illustrate what happens with the flows of gold around the world. And I found myself standing on the edge of this open pit mine in Nevada and just being completely bowled away by the scale of it. It completely took my breath away. And I thought, wow, if that's what we do to get something like gold, which actually, the vast majority of use of gold is what you'd probably call discretionary. We put it away, it becomes a monetary resource, so it goes in banks' vaults. It becomes jewelry that goes, on the necks of people, or the ring fingers and so on. But it's not like civilization would necessarily break down without it. We don't have to have a lot of the gold that we have, although there are some uses. And so I kind of thought to myself, gosh, if that's what we do to get gold, what do we do to get the stuff that we actually really need? And then I thought, well, okay, what is the stuff we really need? So we could probably survive without gold, or for most of the uses of gold. But what are the things that we really need? And so that then just kind of led me down a road of thinking, okay, well, probably it's steel, maybe it's copper, probably. And then I guess I kind of went through the processes of thinking about what we actually needed to make the world that we all kind of depend on. And the funny thing was, a few other people have kind of looked at this, but it's not like there is a list anywhere. These are the most important things out there. There's no way of, this is part of why I think it's kind of intriguing. If you look at GDP, if you look at the breakdown of gross domestic product, it's not like that has any relation to the stuff that we need to survive as a civilization. The vast majority of GDP, the vast majority of market capitalization in many stock markets around the world are companies that probably, dare I say, we could kind of survive without. Like I think we can survive without a lot of social media. It's an important part of the communication process, but it's not like humanity would cease to exist. Maybe we'd be, slightly more better adjusted without it, dare I say. And the same, you could say the same thing about a lot of services, not to do them down. I mean, I work in a services industry. This is the services industry that we're partaking in here, and I think it is important. But I just wanted to focus on something else. I wanted to focus on what are the foundations for the world that we live in. So initially, for me, this was a book that was actually just trying to answer that question. It wasn't really supposed to be about the energy transition and material, our pursuit of materials. I kind of just wanted to know, where does stuff come from? Where does it begin in the ground? When I look at my smartphone, where does the silicon in in the chip come from? And the weird thing was that I spoke to a lot of people about this kind of thing, and it's weirdly difficult to get answers to these things, partly because people don't really spend all that much time thinking about where the supply chain that they're part of actually begins. I don't think, as a book, someone who's written books, I don't spend much time thinking about where the paper comes from. But when you go down that route, it becomes actually fascinating, and you start to realize just what complexity this world actually consists of. And so the book began as trying to kind of think about those things, going to the fundamental beginning of all of the different parts of our world. It's not in any way exhaustive, of course, and so I had to choose a certain number of materials. In fact, I originally started with 7, but it was just becoming too big and unwieldy, so I've got 6 in the end, and they are sand, salt, iron, copper, oil, and lithium. And the idea is that between those 6 materials, you can tell a lot of the, some of the story, at least, a lot of the important story of the human progress, essentially, of the energy transitions we've been through, of how we've all got kind of better off, of how we've been able to feed ourselves, of how technology has developed, and how we have made the world dirtier and may make the world cleaner. And it turns out that looking through those prisms, it is definitely not the only way to look at the world, but it is a fascinating way to look at the world, because you kind of you start to get more of an understanding of how it fits together in a way that conventional economics and a lot of the stuff that we talk about every day doesn't really kind of answer any of those questions.